Any discussion by council for other action on creation of charter review commission? Mr. Soly?
Yeah, so I just put on the agenda, over the last few months, we've been discussing town manager versus town administrator, and a common thread that kept coming up was, do we need a charter review commission? Can we amend the charter? What can we do? We did a lot of spinning our wheels. I mean, we made no progress. We did a lot of spinning our wheels, and the one thing that I heard, whether it was from people that were in favor or against the town manager proposal, was the charter still needs to be looked at. People that supported it said the charter needs to be looked at. People that didn't support the move for manager said the charter needs to be looked at. I personally have been on the record as saying I did support the move to manager from administrator, but the underlying thing kept coming up was the charter itself. So I believe that we do need to have a charter review commission. It's, you know, if the agenda or the will of the people was to have a manager, the charter needs to be thoroughly reviewed, and the ordinance or the amendment would need to be tightened up and acceptable to put on a ballot and be voted on. This will be done by a thorough review of our charter, and it'll clean up loose ends, whether it's the recall provision, whether, you know, there was a lot of talk during this past year with the recall, and that there were holes in the provision, the recall provision. So it's going to give us the opportunity to clean up a lot of loose ends if we form this commission. So I'd make a motion that we form a charter review commission.
Motion by Councilman Soly, second by Councilman Boucher.
Discussion, Mr.
Discussion,
President.
please.
Solicitor Igliozzi, if you could, the second whereas, there shall be 5 members made up of each sitting member of town council, who we're going to appoint people, correct? In essence, are we saying that town council is going to be complete
The
review?
council would be the review, the charter review commission, and you'd be, obviously having a different process than your normal council meeting. But you would act pursuant to the Article 13, Section 8.
Okay, so if, help me, I'm trying to follow this. So if the town council of North Smithfield wishes to establish a charter review commission, should we establish how many members that are going to be appointed by the town council, then we can go into the second, whereas there shall be 5 members made up of each sitting member of the town council. So are we saying in the second one that we're going to only have 5 members? I'm trying to follow this. It's vague.
That's the way it was done last time you amended the charter.
So if we were to say, whereas there shall be 5 members appointed to the charter commission, because the way I'm reading this, it's saying that the town council is the charter review commission, which ultimately we will be.
If you want to appoint somebody to perform that and bring it back to you, I guess you could do that.
So as it stands now, the 5 members of the council are going to review the charter. We're not going to get a charter review commission established?
Well, either you want it to be the charter review commission.
I'd rather establish a charter review.
Yeah, I would want to establish a charter review commission. I don't see it being written that way on this. So if we could take a look, I'm going to support this. I just want to make sure that we have the numbers of the people, like maybe 7, and an odd number, of course, that's easy.
Right.
Maybe 9. You know, does it get? And it doesn't always have to be boards and commissions either. You know, which is a good idea, but. We have a lot of talented people in town that can serve.
So how many members would the council want to be on this charter review commission?
Probably
9.
9.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And when would you want the election to be, when would you want their work to be completed by for you council to have a public hearing?
You're looking probably 12 to 15 months
Well,
to go completely through the charter.
Well, you have to decide what election this work is being done for.
Right.
And then you're gonna decide when they have to report to you. And then you have to have a public hearing, and then you have to put it on the ballot, obviously. So you have to do that, you got several things you have to do there.
Composition of this council is going to change. It probably will change. So I don't know, are we going to,
That's what I mean, if you're not going to do this,
yeah,
prior to this election, November election, then I'm not so sure that
Well, that was one of the issues that I
it goes
discussed,
to the same issue that we were.
was if the makeup of the council changes and the new sitting council doesn't want the charter review.
Well,
Because-
I mean, what would happen is the charter review would report, if you're gonna make 9 members be a charter review, they're gonna report to you, the council, whoever that council is. In other words, do you want this to be under November? Is your goal to have the charter review done for this November election or November of 2018? What election are they reviewing the charter for? Or are you not picking an election at this time? And you're gonna just have the work done without an election in sight?
that has to go to a referendum.
Does that make sense?
Can you recognize Mr. Vadeney?
Yes, Paul, Mr. Vadeney, Paul?
Paul Vadeney, 31 Greenwood Street. Certainly I'm not an attorney, but based on past precedent, you could have an election, a special election to have a charter vote at any time because you're amending your charter. It doesn't have to be on a regular election date or on the election of the change of officers. So you could do a charter review commission and give it 10 months, 12 months and say this is when the report needs to be done. And it'd be submitted to the city council, your predecessors. When I was appointed to a building commission that oversaw the middle school, we reported to 3 different town councils over the course of time. We were formed by one, and by the end, we were reporting to the 3rd different council, and a 2nd administrator on top of that. So I don't think you're bound by one council, my opinion. I may be wrong, but as far as the date of an election, it doesn't have to be a November election. It could be a special election, just like you were planning to do earlier. It just wouldn't have, I think the reality of it, I think you could do this in a 10 to 12 month period. You could do a full review. It's going to take some work. It's going to take more than meeting once every other week. I think, my opinion on it. 7 to 9 people is a good number of people to do it.
Were you on one of the
I
charter?
was never on a charter.
You never on a charter review commission?
Why not? You're on every other commission.
That's why. To be honest, I thought about this after I made my comments, a couple months ago, and I would be interested in serving on this committee. And I think, in reality, the Charter Review Commission, and it's just my opinion here, shouldn't include any elected or appointed officials from boards and commissions in town,
Yeah.
because then you could, I don't know if it's self-serving is the right term, but there's no undue influence coming, the council isn't saying, well, this is what, this is my agenda. I would look at it as the Charter Commission would meet with the council, would meet with the administrator, would meet with the solicitor, any group that's mentioned in the charter, and say, what's working for you? What do you think would be changed as part of the process, as well as having public hearings to the whole town saying, what do you think we should be looking to change? And then that group sits down, and after getting all that input, then they start going through, the 46-page document or whatever it is, and saying, okay, if we change this line item, where else does it change? On page 19, how does it? And so it's a process that you got to go through. But my opinion would be that they would be all independent people, not coming from a board or commission. It's just my opinion. But I think a 10 or 12 month period. Personally, I think it could be done in a 10 or 12 month period
Mr. President.
to get a report back.
Yeah, Ms. Vadeney, that's what I was alluding to. Sometimes we always have a member from a board or commission. Thank you. You explained it much more articulate than I could have. Thank you for saying that. In my statement, I don't see the next council coming and having any objection to having the charter review. I just don't see it happen. But a 7-month turnaround time to get it on, whatever the amount of time we have, it's not going to happen. So, yeah, I was just saying that basically some of us may choose to run for election, not choose to run for election, and it's going to be a different, but I if I were a newbie coming in as a council person, I'd say, hey, thank you for getting that going for me to start addressing these things. So, but I don't know if it's going to be enough time to get it on for this election at all.
I don't think it would I realistically don't, by the time the language would be drafted, and then it would get approved, and then it would get submitted to be on the ballot, I
Yeah.
don't think the time would
Be
be.
rushed.
It would be rushed, and we'd be back to the same boat in another year and a
Same
half,
problems, right.
where we'd be asking for another charter review commission because there were mistakes made. So, you know, again, I have my reasons, but ultimately, the one thing I did hear was people said the charter needs to be looked at, and let's do it the right way. Let's just get it done, do it the right way, and, you know, again, if we need to if we have to put a date timeline to it, we can go 12, 15 months, and then, get us a report within 15 months, and then at that 15-month mark, whether it's us, whether it's 5 new people, whether it's 3, it doesn't matter. The report, the work will be there, and the next sitting council will decide as they wish.
I think the decision that would be made by you guys is, we want the charter reviewed. We want a complete charter review. Not a complete review of the charter, not necessarily revision, we want a complete review of the charter. That's really what they'd be doing. And so that would be the decision that you would make. When the report comes due, you could decide the timeline, but
That's why I said 12 to 15 months.
Mr.
Yeah.
President, if I may expand on this, the charter as well as ordinances other than zoning, I feel this board should take on, because we use charter interchangeably with our ordinances, but they're not the same.
they're completely different.
Different.
Ordinances are set by council
Council.
completely.
Right, but as we change things in the charter, it may change things, or at least just some wording in ordinances. So I would think that, I wouldn't want the board looking at this to stop and not look at the ordinances and just make sure that everything is copacetic, because they're saying that it's not under their purview. I know someone like you, if you were running this, you would do it, because you know that needs to be done, but, many people might not.
Just want to point of order, Mr. Solicitor, charter review does not touch ordinances, because it was a.
Yeah, this is
entirely
really
different.
about, that gets a little convoluted, because this is really about the form of government that you're gonna operate on. And charters are not intended and designed to be detailed. Ordinance provide detail on individual, and they can be amended, obviously ordinance can be amended very easily. Council could have 2 meetings on an ordinance and you have a new law. The only way a charter gets amended is if it goes to a vote of the people in the town.
Can I give one example? Maybe I just didn't explain myself well enough. Tonight, we're going to be looking at an ordinance to change some things about the town administrator's car. It says
That would
town,
never be in a charter.
it says, no, that wouldn't be in the charter. That's an ordinance. However, if we change the charter, let's say we change the charter to go to a town manager, that wording in the ordinance would have to change. That's all I'm saying, is that I would like this review commission to make sure that everything matches up, because the wording would have to change in that ordinance.
You can do it that way.
That's all I'm saying.
Right, but
Not
the way that would happen, assuming that that situation happened, the council would pass an ordinance to do one of 2 things.
2 readings.
Anywhere in the ordinances where it says town administrator, it's now town manager. But that's not by charter, that would be by ordinance. Or you would say in your charter, wherever we say the words, we formally said the words town manager, town administrator is now town manager. So you would do it in your charter, and then you would do an ordinance. You either do one ordinance that says you change it, but you might not want to do that. You might want to look at all the ordinances at that point in time through ad hoc committee or some other committee. It's certainly up to the council, but that's a lot of work to put into some charter review committee. Charter review committee is a very.
The charter is how the town operates. It's a system of government that it operates under.
Yes.
Your ordinance are all the laws. So one says this is how the government runs, the whole outline of everything, whether it's a town manager, town administrator, town council, with a solicitor. It defines all of those things. Your ordinance will get into the thing saying, okay, if it's a town car, this is what happens with it or whatever. It's a law. The ordinances are laws. So there's a dividing line between the 2 of them. You guys can change your ordinance in 2 readings. So all it takes is 2 readings.
Right.
2 readings
I
and 3
understand.
people to vote for it. That's all it takes to change an ordinance.
I understand all of that very well. My point is that not every member of this council or next council's coming are going to know to make those changes. Unless we have some committee looking at it, whether it's a charter review committee, and I believe the ad hoc ordinance review is really only for zoning right now, correct?
Correct.
That's why I
Well-
brought that up.
Well, no, because we're actually, once we clear up some of these zoning issues, we've been asked to look at public safety, the composition of public safety, and that, it's like everything else, it takes time. So the ad hoc committee went from 1 meeting a month to 2 meetings a month, so it's gonna take time, but let's just focus on the charter.
Because
Yeah, it'll be taken care of.
Okay,
There's
so that
people
was my
that-
only concern, just to make sure that,
that would be my.
All of our
recommendation.
ducks are in a
I would
row.
put it together, but that's up to the council. Because there are companies that you hire, as you may know, to codify and review all your ordinances. And they come in and they'll hear all the inconsistencies, and you pass one big statement that cleans up all your codifications. But that's an expensive thing to do. That's a tremendous burden to put on volunteer.
Those are more legal issues.
You have to have a team of lawyers on it.
But I understand your point. There would ultimately going to have to be some consistencies being done, but
Later
that's
on.
something that doesn't need to go, we don't need to be doing that when we're addressing the form of government that's being voted on by the public. Now they vote on it. When it comes to an ordinance, council can do that. Obviously, all inconsistencies will have to be corrected. And maybe we have to have another committee. But I wouldn't throw that on the same committee. Maybe another committee, maybe. That's my advice is if you see where this goes, see if you get this.
That's the
The
whole
other,
thing.
the other thing too would be is that until the charter change gets made, you can't change your ordinance. So you could sit there and go through the whole thing and just as, I'm not saying this is what they go to a professional manager and you change all your ordinances, it goes to a vote, the town says no. You spent a lot of time spinning your wheels to change your ordinances that aren't gonna matter.
that's true.
So you're putting the cart before the horse really, so you gotta do one before the other, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a very good point.
But
Could I,
it's just,
I was going to say, I got some minor changes that can, I think, if you want to go through them now, you can go through them now. If you, maybe I could just go through them quickly and see if they're satisfied.
Yeah,
It'll
absolutely.
take a minute.
Thank you, Paul.
The second whereas clause, there shall be 9 members. The word 5 will be stricken, the word 9 will be inserted. After the word members, it shall be the word appointed. The words made up of each sitting member of shall be stricken. So it will read, there shall be 9 members appointed by the town council, by the town council.
That sounds good, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
In paragraph 2, where you've got subsection C, which is their, paragraph 3, the third whereas, see the subsection C, the little C there? Select proposed revisions to be put before voters in a special or general election. So we're just adding the word special or general, because I left them blank, because I didn't know which one you were gonna select.
So, Mr. Galuzzi, when you say the commission shall be governed by the same rules as those governed by the council, so we're talking Robert's rules as well as reporting with the
So we
secretary?
can do that, or we can put Robert's rules, you got ahead of me by one, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, well, the town council has its own set of rules, but perhaps we want to say, if you don't, the council rules have their rules, I think you probably want to just say Robert's rules of order.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And we strike everything after that. So the commission shall be governed by the Robert's rules of order.
And that will that require minutes being posted with the Secretary of State site, correct? So we don't have to put that in there, do we?
No,
Okay.
because state law requires any body, no matter how they're appointed, they have to comply with that for the minutes. We don't need to do that, but if you wanted to do that, you have that.
So we're striking out, was it the last whereas? Or no?
No, we're not striking out.
governed by
The fourth one.
Robert's
The
rules of
fourth-
order.
right.
That's the
The
only
fourth
change,
one,
the rest
okay.
of it's gone.
It's going to be governed by the Robert's Rules of Order. And then the fifth whereas would read, and I'll just read it all together, and I'm just adding the words within 12 months. The recommendations and report of the commission shall be presented at a public hearing of the town council within 12 months, or, I don't know, you pick a time. You want to say 15 months, 12 months? I heard two different periods.
I think 15 months would be best.
15 months, shall be presented, obviously presented at a public hearing of the town council within 15 months. And in order to provide the town council with sufficient time to do, the rest reads just the way it is.
Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And then the very last paragraph on that page, it says, be it further resolved. You see the blank? And just say, I'm going to begin with, I'll read it to you. Be it further resolved that the town council, following a public hearing and discussion, will include those certain proposed amendments on the local ballot to be voted on by town residents at a special or general election. Right?
So, Mr. President, if I may, so the language here is basically, whatever these 9 appointed members come up, will be brought for now, or do we say the opinion or the opine or whatever will be considered to be brought? I mean,
Oh, you mean they don't have to bring it to you? Or
well, I
they
mean,
should bring a report
whomever
to
the
you.
council is, yeah, but at that point, shouldn't council be the deciding factor of which goes into that?
You mean the final establishment? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're right, so
Am I
that
wrong?
last-
I mean, I just wanted to make sure the
Yeah,
council had the
you're-
final, we take all the opinion and a majority of the council would decide what went on the ballot.
Okay, so we'll consider those items.
The findings, yeah, whatever, yeah, all the legal people say that stuff.
So when you go down at the very last sentence, obviously we've changed the circumstance now, so that makes perfect good sense. So it should read, be it further resolved that the town council, following a public hearing and discussion, will consider
Yes,
discuss and vote on those proposed amendments on the local ballot to be voted on by town residents at a special or general election. So you're going to consider which items, right?
yes, or whomever the council is at that time.
Right. We'll consider. I don't know if that makes sense. We'll consider
Discuss and vote those proposed amendments.
Does that cover your concern, Mr. Vice President?
Yes, for future councils, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Azar.
Again, if you feel comfortable with those changes and you have it, I guess you could vote on it. If you don't, we can make those changes for the next meeting. So you're giving them 15 months. If you want a really clean document, I can make those changes for you. It's up to you. You feel comfortable with those changes handwritten?
I do, because if we vote, so those in the affirmative could always put it back on the agenda for a reconsideration if something's not quite right. But are we rushing it? I'm sorry, Mr. President, do we want to just take one more meeting, or do we want to vote tonight? You know what, I think one more meeting, something may surface that we didn't pick up on.
I think I'd like to just give you, if you're comfortable with those things, I'll give you a clean
But clean one
document.
for the next one.
This saves a lot of back and forth with emails, back and forth.
Yes.
So,
And may I, if you could do a stricken through and then a clean one, and then we could see where the changes were, all right? I mean, I wrote it in, but it's kind of my dining room table, God knows.
I just
where
rather
it's
have a
ended up.
clean document if you're gonna vote to do it.
Okay.
And people are gonna start forming this.
Okay,
Then the
so-
next step would be you'd want to,
so motion, so table this until March
The
7th,
very next meeting.
next meeting.
next meeting.
You already had a motion on the table.
I withdraw my motion and, motion to continue on, what is it, March
March 7th.
7th?
I'll put a clean,
So you made a motion, was there a second? No.
Yes.
Yes.
There was a second.
Kim.
Okay.
So this will be continued till March 7th.
and I would just ask the council for the leeway that if I do find something that we did speak to, I'll put it on there and present it as part of that. Can I do that?
Absolutely.
Madam Clerk, just to back that up, maybe we have a sub-item to start advertising, to
Yes,
authorize
please.
advertising,
Advertising for what?
the members of the group.
The members?
In case we pass it, that way we can authorize advertising.
Second by the chair.
Yeah, good point.
Because this way we'll start. If people are willing to serve, I hope that for Mr. Vadney will consider putting his application to this board for the charter review. Okay. So we need there's a motion, a second. Okay, roll call vote now, please.
Ms. Ellis? Yes. Mrs. Nato?
Yes.
Mr. Soly?
Yes.
Mr. Zalinski?
Yes.
Mr. Boucher?
Yes. Discussion by council, vote on their action on appointments to boards, commissions.
You skip that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Discussion by council, vote on their action on ordinance amending use and markings of town vehicles.
Is this new stuff?
This is amended again.
This-
Okay.
this is 3 pages.
Deb, do I have this one in mind, or is this
Mr.
new?
Realty just gave it to me tonight.
Okay.
There's one sentence, there's two sentences added. It's number 8, they're both number 8. There was, if you want to know the difference between the one you have and the one that you have before you, in each section, there is a paragraph, number 8, you see that? There's A8 and B8 have been added. And that is to take into consideration the possibility that the town council may enter into a contract with an employee that provides vehicles. And then if that contract would take precedent over the ordinance, because you don't want them to conflict. And you can think of that happening either with some special employee, like a town manager or a town administrator, or somebody who's a director of public safety who's not one and the same with the, you may ultimately have an opportunity to enter into a contract. That's trying to just cover you in case you may never do it. You may never do it. But I know there's at least one contract in town already. That's why I put it in there.
Okay.
I have exempted the police from every aspect of this.
Right.
But to be sure that the chief is exempted, I made sure that, that contract language is there, so there's no
You
confusion.
should say the chief's the current contract, right?
Right, he's under a contract, so
Right.
you have to exempt people who have
Right.
contracts. How could you not do that? Now, you may not grant somebody a new contract,
with it.
and you may want to change it, but if you granted a contract, how can you not protect that person? So this this is just a side issue that I came up with at the, and I recommend that you, that's just to be assured that you don't have an inconsistent contract with the ordinance. And you're always gonna come before you, notice the contract has to be approved by the council. So that's the only sentences that have been added since this has been presented pursuant to your request. If you want me to go over with it generally, I will. Do you want me to go through this generally?
If I may ask the solicitor a question? David, we have three sheets of paper here, 22-22-222. And we see that at the bottom of that page, we have subsection of the ordinance governs the use of town vehicles. The separate, the third page I'm going to refer to has that same exact verbiage. And then we switch into page 2.
You're right, you're absolutely right.
So can we just take this third page and remove it, so from the clutter, Are we okay with that?
Well, no, what we have to do on that third page, you see your paragraph
Oh,
number
yeah,
8?
this ordinance shall not, and this ordinance shall not govern, well, it's the
But
same
no,
thing.
but the subsection, you see the paragraph listed number 8, the
8B,
third page?
yeah,
It should say subsection B, not subsection A. And I'll explain, if you want me to go, let me go through this.
So strike 7B on the third page and change.
No, that's 7.
No.
No, 8 should say subsection B on the third page. And I'll explain to you.
oh, so, okay, so the page with just 2 lines on it, it's going to be, instead of 8, it's going to be 7B.
Nope, instead of 8, it says 8 subsection B. You see the letter
Oh,
A?
subsection A,
It
yeah.
should be put a B in there.
I see it, okay,
Put a B
okay.
in there. And I'll explain to you exactly how that works.
Okay.
And I probably should have just done this to begin with, so I apologize.
Before you go through it, Mrs. Solicitor, page 2, business use, in the middle of the paragraph, vehicles are to be driven only if licensed and shall be driven in a safe, is that by a licensed driver? What's meant by that? Licensed through the state, licensed?
Well, let me go through it. If you go to, for a moment, if you go to the one that you have before you got the one with the red, just so, only because the one I gave you doesn't have red on it, and you have any of the ones with the red on it, just so you'll understand how this works. The one with the red, everything that is red is new, and everything that is not red was your original ordinance. Is your original ordinance. So the one that I gave you that doesn't have red, unfortunately, only has underlined, because I didn't have a color printer.
Okay.
I apologize, but I wanted you to understand, if you look at just for your point of view, the language that you're referring to, Councilwoman, I did not put in there. It's in your original ordinance.
That's old stuff, okay.
So that's
But it's underlined.
it's underlined in which section?
Black for the sun.
It's underlined. It's 1, business use,
Is it on page 1 or page 2?
page 2,
Okay.
used by
I'm on
town
page
administrator and
I'm
director of
on,
public
I'm on
safety.
page 1.
Okay, so that
Could
brings
you
you to,
stop with page 1?
we're not paginated here, so there's no page.
Page
So-
1 is entitled 2-222
Got it.
Town Vehicles, A, used by town employees.
No, okay, can we just paginate page 1, page 2?
Okay, that's page 1.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
It's 222 subsection A. See that?
Mhm.
Now, if you're looking at that, everything that is not underlined is your existing ordinance. So I didn't change your existing ordinance at all. So what I did, just so you conceptually understand, because of the confusion between vehicles used by employees that are authorized by the town administrator and vehicles used by the town administrator or director of public safety, were never clearly segregated. What I've done is, I've made 2 sections. I made your original ordinance apply only to employees, and I made a subsection B that applies to the town administrator and the director of public safety. And what's the general difference? If you're an employee, you'll get approval from the town administrator to use a vehicle. If you're the town administrator or the director of public safety, you get authority from the town council. That's what I did, because the town council wanted to approve it. So if you understand that concept, the concept that employees get approval of the administrator gets approval of the town council to use a vehicle. That's the first thing. And then within each section, there's 3 types of approvals. You get approval to use a car during the day, during normal work hours. You get approval to use a car to go to work-related seminars with approval, prior approval, and you get the ability to use a vehicle for commuter use to and from work because you're on call, again, with approval. Under no circumstance, in either one of those cases, is personal use allowed. So you have three types of approval. You can use it from, let's just assume the hours of operation, electricity is 9 to 5. Let's just make that, I don't know what the actual hours are.
8 to 4.
8 to 4. So you can approve, use a car from 8 to 4. You can approve a car for seminars and other professional events, in addition to 8 to 4. And you can approve an automobile for commuter use, which means from the office to home and home to the office. Commuter use does not mean personal use, it means back and forth. That's what the ordinance does. By the way, that's what your ordinance had said. I'm not changing anything that your ordinance said, it just was unclear, the difference between employees and administrator and director of public safety. And why did I put the director of public safety with the administrator? Because the administrator has the power to appoint herself the director of public safety. So
And or someone
Or
else.
someone else.
And at that point, it would require, may require.
Either way, it requires council approval.
Yes.
So that's, again, it's not that complicated of an ordinance. I know it seems like it is, but it really is, your ordinance just clarified. I really didn't expand anything.
Mr. President, could we consider this the first reading this
That's what
evening?
it is, yeah.
No,
Why not?
because it hasn't been posted 4 business days.
Oh, because of the amendments that were made
It's not
to
even in the right order, it's not in the right format.
Okay, so we're gonna have this on the next agenda, and then it'll be the first reading? Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk.
So I guess we'll continue this until,
Right, and then we'll have it cleaned up and everything. Well, we have, but yeah.
so, okay, we'll continue this until March 7th.
Maybe comment about on-call.
Okay.
So, we brought up on-call a couple times. I work for a company that allows us to be able to take on policy. My company also requires us to be on-call. General rule of thumb when being on-call is if you're within X amount of an area, so for me, it's within an hour response time. So as long as I'm within an hour response time, I take my vehicle. If I'm outside of an hour response time, I have to either A, forfeit my on-call, give it to somebody else, or B, I don't go. I have to be able to respond within that hour. My concern with on-call, the use of on-call in whether or not, do we put a restriction like that in there? As far as, if you're going away, or if you're taking a day trip to New Jersey, to Atlantic City, are you really on call at that point? That's kind of my thinking on that is.
I clarified in here that if you go on vacation or you are absent from work for more than 3 days, the vehicle should be left at a town facility.
Right, but I'll just use this as a general, if me and I was on call this weekend. I had called into work at 4 o'clock, Sunday morning. If I was to say be going to breakfast with my family, I would take my work vehicle to breakfast. My wife and kids would take the family car to breakfast. If I get called, I would then leave from breakfast to go. If me and my family were going to New York, I wouldn't be taking the car. Someone would be on call for me, because I can't respond within a certain amount of time. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
So I can make a day trip to New York, but it doesn't mean I can respond to one of my sites within an hour. You know what I'm saying? But I can get back home in 3. So that's why I'm wondering, do we put a restriction on there as far as when you're on call, you have to stay within X amount of, because that was an argument Administrator Hamilton had made during the last meeting it was just a day trip. I went down there for a day, I came back. You were 600 miles away. There's no way you could respond to a public emergency 600 miles away. Well, 6 hours away, I'm sorry, 6 hours away. So that's kind of where I'm going with that, you know what I mean?
Well, there's two ways, you're right, but you're drawing a distinction, which is a valid distinction, of trying to define on-call, and this ordinance wouldn't allow you to take it to breakfast.
Right, okay. I see what you're saying.
theoretically, this ordinance would let you take it to breakfast for your personal use.
Okay.
That's
This
the
ordinance
difference.
would not let you get a loaf of bread on your way home from work.
That's the deal. If you want to provide some more flexibility, that's fine. This is just an ordinance that the council president asked me to draft. I tried to just clarify. Really, I just tried to turn over the authority of granting the town administrator the right to use a vehicle to the council instead of the ambiguity. So whatever the council wants to do, the ordinance can be changed accordingly. You want to define that?
No, I just misunderstood, because the way I was taking what you were saying as far as public safety director.
Well, because the reason why I put that there is because your charter provides that in the event the town administrator does not appoint a public safety director, she can appoint herself.
Right.
So we wouldn't want a situation where the town administrator comes to the council and the council says you can't have a car.
Right.
But she goes under the employee section and she appoints herself the public safety director, and she gives herself a car as a public. It seems to me that would be, again,
A loophole.
just contrary to what you want. If you're saying you don't want her to have a car, she comes before you and she wants a car to go home on a commute, and you say no. Well, she wants it as a public safety director, you would say no too, I guess. If somebody else is a public safety director, you might say yes, you might say no to her. I don't know the answer to that. Those are questions the council would be presented when somebody asks you for a car. Right now, there's only one car and there's only one public safety director. But it just so happens your charter allows the administrator to have both hats. So that's why I put those two in that second section. I think that you should be, that's why I say it's and or. So it may be two different people.
It's just like when Socket has it.
Maybe two different
Socket
people.
had a situation where the mayor was also the public safety director, but now under the current administration, the mayor has someone else. I think it's too soon to have a public safety director. I think his name is Mr. Gillette.
The other side of the issue is, how much do you want to constrain this? This provides that, in my mind, no personal use, and then really 3 steps, Car during the day, car to go to seminars, so to speak, professional seminars, which are not necessarily business related, but they're not town business per se. And then commuter use. Again, I keep on saying commuter use so people don't get confused. Commuter use does not mean I take it home and then I go out to eat at night. It means I take it home and it goes to my driveway.
Right.
That's commuter use.
That's what I was trying to.
That's what the IRS means by commuter use. That's what the IRS means by de minimis fringe benefit.
Well, that's what I was trying to.
I didn't make that in the ordinance. That was in your ordinance. I'm not creating something that's not in there. That's in your ordinance.
Well, that's what I was trying to say with my works theory on vehicle uses. When I'm not on call, it goes driveway to driveway. When I am on call, we're allowed to use it. And that's why I was saying, for giving to her for commuter use, do you put it state, like, in the charters, if she's with it, or in the ordinances, if she's not, if they're gonna be away for 3 days, she appoints someone. Should it be, if you're not able to respond, I would think you would appoint somebody, I would think.
Yeah, but see, that's a different question. Go back to commuter for a moment. Just want you to understand. Commuter use
From home to work.
is from home to work, from work to home.
Right.
That's what the definition of commuter, I didn't make that definition. That was in your ordinance, and where they got that was from the IRS code. That's why, if you look, there's a reference to that, and there's a reference to the de minimis fringe benefit. I asked, actually Jason, at one point to look into that, and at the end of the day, that becomes an auditing, in my mind, not a technically, it becomes a review process, not necessarily an auditing function. But theoretically, if the way the IRS works is, if you're using a vehicle for personal use, they start looking at how much personal, how much business, and instead of being a de minimis fringe benefit, which means non-taxable, it then becomes a taxable. It gets added to the W-2. So if I was making $80,000 a year and I was determined that I was using the car for personal use, 2 things happen. One, I may be violating your ordinance, at least this ordinance, and secondly, you would now increase my W-2 by $5,000 because I got a benefit above, a fringe benefit that's got value. But I don't wanna get into the tax side of it, and my position on that is, that's gonna be Mr. Palmer's position, but your ordinance doesn't allow for that. It's saying we don't want a taxable event to happen. That's what your ordinance says, we don't want the taxable event to happen. We don't want a fringe benefit to be created. By the way, not my ordinance, your ordinance says that. I just want to be clear. My ordinance only takes your ordinance, kind of copies it, and says, we have, the only thing that does it has a different approval process for the administrator.
Yeah.
I just want to make that clear. I haven't changed the mechanisms of your ordinance.
Councilor Soly, you're not on call 365 days of the year, are you?
No, well, that was the point I was getting at,
Yeah.
was she hung her hat on being on call, and that's why she went to Maryland, and that's what I was saying.
Yeah, that's just too far out.
Yeah.
And if you are on call, Councilor Soly, you will get a call from the
Yes.
people that direct you to be there, and there'll be a document that you were on call for such and such a situation.
Yeah.
Does your company have logs, travel logs, or is it just because someone drives?
Depends on the vehicle you drive, once a month. My vehicle, once a month, I have to fill out a use log, which basically it's condition of the vehicle, tires, last oil change, fluid levels, does the horn right, the blinkers right, all that. It's basically just a vehicle inspection form, they call it. And then if you drive a DOT truck, you gotta do your DOT, which I used to drive all the time, you do a daily check on the truck, brakes and aerial lift and all that stuff. But, and then daily, well, whenever we fuel up, just like the town, we punch in our driver ID, we punch in our mileage every day, and they pull reports on it. I mean, yeah, we fill out reports nonstop.
So the operator of that vehicle is responsible for reporting, as well as making sure that maintenance is performed on, by reporting that X amount of miles at that point, it triggers that maintenance estimate.
Every 90 days, we're required to bring our vehicle into fleet services for inspection.
That's something we might want to think about with, because, yeah, all these are good points, great
But Mr.
points.
President, I do want to point out that Councilor Soly is raising a very good point, that you may want to address on call. That you may want to say that there are times when somebody might have the vehicle with them at breakfast or at lunch or at dinner because they are on call. I don't know what that means. I don't have a way of knowing how that function works in this town. I don't know how often the Director of Public Safety gets called into an emergency. I don't know.
We don't know either.
We don't know either.
We don't know how many times or,
So I mean, that's something to consider.
Yeah.
About, I mean, that's,
did we ask for that information? How many
Yeah.
responses? We did, no?
We didn't get a response.
Get a
Oh, but
response.
we did ask for it.
Did ask for it.
Okay.
But if we were doing a charter review, couldn't that be something in the charter that we could change and appoint somebody else's public safety, like
Yes.
fire or police, who does always
yes,
attend
you could do that. You could appoint
emergency
somebody else.
situations? And then that way take it away from the administrator, because, I mean, why should she have to respond if we have police and fire and other?
Even have the EMA involved.
Yeah,
Sure,
so maybe that's
absolutely.
an issue that the charter review could look at, and then that takes away that whole
Well,
on-call.
it takes away that issue, but again, the question still becomes, and I can't speak for the council, it's just not unusual for the chief elected official of a town or a city.
Or the country.
Well, I'm focusing on localities, to respond.
In a reasonable amount of time.
Right, I mean,
About 400 miles.
So I just want you to think, I understand there's a little controversy going on, but just think about, and you don't have to, it's only an ordinance in the sense that you can always change it, but you want to just think about, what is it that you expect that person to do in that job? You heard somebody who was, a lot of town administrators have a contract, right? Not town administrators, town managers have a contract, and they say, but it's part of their package.
They get a stipend from what
They
we
get a
heard.
stipend, or if they get a town vehicle, it's not a de minimis fringe benefit, it's a full print, but they get taxed on it.
They get W-2 now.
They get W-2, I think that is the line. Once you cross into allowing
Yeah.
unfettered use of a vehicle, nothing wrong with that, but then they get taxed on it. That's really, that to me, from that perspective, you either give them the benefit of your tax, as part of their wages, or then you want them to comply with the de minimis fringe benefit rules that the IRS set, which means we don't want you to violate and go in for personal use. There's some leeway, but the idea is we don't want it to become to the point where it's your vehicle.
Mr. President, if I may, unless somebody has other grave questions here, because it's not up for first reading, can we move through the agenda? Maybe we'll get out of here on time one night, and we'll put this on for the next meeting, correct? Thank you, Mr.
Do
President.
you want it on for first reading next meeting?
I would.
Yes, please.
Yes.
And then, so we're gonna take it out in the present language for the first reading, and then, you'll think about this on call if you wanna, or any other issues.
Yeah.
Between the first and second reading, I guess any amendments to be made.
And maybe what you said about the maintenance of the vehicle or whatnot,
Yeah, all that
for
stuff.
90 days, this
I
way.
can talk to Mr. Pendergast about that later.
Arrange, okay, all right.
I'll reach out to him.
All right, so this item was to be continued until March 7th?
Yep.